Well, I'm delighted to welcome John Mark Comer, who's been a friend for several years. And I'm just thrilled that my first ever Zoom interview is with my mate, John Mark Comer. And John, thanks so much for agreeing to be interviewed. And you've got many friends here at St. Aldate's, many who have heard you at New Wine. We follow you on your podcast. We've got your books. We've got T-shirts that we need you to sign. But for those listening, those few who don't know about you, tell us a bit about who is John Mark Comer?
The most important thing to know is I don't have T-shirts. That's Simon. The other stuff is there. What a joy to see your face and your cool glasses. Yeah, I am in Portland, Oregon, which is in the Pacific Northwest of America. So kind of think West Coast, go north to the miserable England-like weather of rain. And that's where I live. And father of 3 kids. We live right in the city, have been here at a church we planted 17 years ago. So just about. So right in the city, and attempting to do my very best to pastor on a team of leaders and to teach the way of Jesus. And yeah, I write books and do some of that stuff as well.
Fantastic. John, you're one of the most organized, disciplined, considered people I know. You really are.
Or one of the most deceitful, apparently, or you just don't get out much. I'm not sure.
I know. And, in public and in private, you practice what you preach, you practice what you write, and you are a man who's organized and you follow the disciplines of Jesus. How has this COVID-19 pandemic affected your walk with the Lord in any way? How has it interfered with those disciplines, or has it just underlined and helped them?
Yeah, I'm grateful that we had a kind of light life architecture in place of Sabbath and morning prayer and a daily discipline of scripture and a really tight-knit community, a little group of people that we're in very deep relationship with. And those have really held through the storm, kind of been an anchor point of order in all of the swirling chaos. So I'm really grateful for that. I've had to, not out of maturity, out of immaturity, not out of strength, out of weakness, I've had to spend a lot more time in morning prayer. Just a lot of that probably sounds more spiritual than it is, just processing my anxiety with Jesus. I'm by personality and by immaturity, I'm very bent toward anxiety. And then in particular, as a leader, it's a crazy time to lead a church. I mean, they don't teach you in seminary like how to lead through a global pandemic in an age of social media outrage and constant ambient anxiety, So that's not a complaint. It's just I have no experience. I literally, what's that line from Charlie's new book? The truth is everybody's winging it. I was like, that the horse says that, if you've read that. Truth is everybody's winging it. That's the truth. At least pastors, we're all winging it. We don't know what we're doing. So a lot of anxiety. And so it's been such an interesting time of the first couple of weeks in particular. We're just so rich at a spiritual level with God. Because, when we're desperate, there's just a level of attention to God and acute, ache in our soul. And at the same time, just my body, I'm just so aware of like the theology of the body and a theology of the soul, not as the wispy thin part of you that floats up to heaven, not the Looney Tunes Platonic view of the soul, but biblical, like the integration of your whole being, including your body. And just so aware that my body is the temple of the Holy Spirit. My body is in need of salvation, in need of healing, that sin is in my body at a cellular level. And Jesus slowly but surely is healing my body and my soul to bring me into alignment with the kingdom. That ultimately won't happen until the resurrection, but has begun now in the spirit and even in my body, not just in my mind. And so really just trying to present my body before God as an offering, like Paul writes, which for me looks like breathing, a little contemplative prayer and asking Jesus to have mercy in my anxiety and a daily kind of discipline of yielding the illusion of control back to God and just resting in his love and letting him calm and comfort a kind of limbic system that's out of control, you know? And so, yeah, so basic architecture was there. Sabbath is such a gift, relationships. It's a terrible time for social relationships. Like there's not like cocktail parties to go to, which is, I'm introverted like you. So that's my idea of the seventh layer of hell. If I was Dante and was writing the poem now, it would be like the very bottom would be, you know, the cocktail party.
I
Hey,
like
what's your
the
name?
cocktail party, just me and you. We've done that.
Yeah,
Good,
that's,
isn't it?
yes. If by cocktail, you mean you and me drinking a glass of wine in private and talking theology and soul architecture. Yes. So it's not a good time for social relationships, but it's a great time for deep relationships. My best friend and I are talking more than ever, and mentors that I'm spending hours in conversation with over the phone, you know, and my wife. And so there's a real sweetness to some of that, but obviously it's been a hard time.
Yeah. Thank you. That's so helpful. I mean, everything is being shaken, and particularly the church for us. But Jesus says he's going to build the church, and the gates of hell won't prevail against it, and nor will COVID-19. What do you think the church will look like in 2021? How are we going to do church? What needs to stay? What needs to be put in? What do we need to throw away?
You know, this sounds like a cop out. I think I could be way off. The best answer to that is I don't know. You know, I mean, we don't have any idea what 21 will be like, you know? There's a bunch of smart people who claim they know what will happen. The problem is there's a bunch of smart people who claim different things. And one of them or a couple of them will be right. Some people think this will all be over by January. Other people think it'll never end. It'll just be this way forever, and we'll never shake hands again and wear masks for 10 years. You know, I don't know. I really don't know. And I think that, you know, one of the things that I really felt the Spirit kind of speak to me is, you know, there's this weird thing that's happened in the digital online space, in particular in America with the Trump election. It could just be an American thing. Maybe I'd love to hear if it's a thing in England or not, where there's an expectation on pastors to be almost like political leaders and have positions. Like our elders multiple times a week are getting asked to have a position on vaccines because there's like raging debate in America over vaccines in children, you know, and I'm like, that's an important thing. I understand that, but I'm not a doctor, and that's not a theological position. Now, but for both sides, they view it as a moral issue. The problem is we have both people in our church who love Jesus, who are intelligent people, who totally disagree with each other about the science, you know? So all that to say, I really felt the Spirit remind me, like, let politicians do their job. Let economists and business professionals do their job. Your job is to ground people in the presence and peace of God, and to really function almost as a spiritual director for a community of people. I really think pastors should look more to spiritual directors and therapists for kind of a template than to CEOs or politicians. I think I could be way off, you know? So all that to say, you know, at a spiritual level, I think the invitation of the moment is to embrace what the mystics have long called holy uncertainty. Just the ability to say, I don't know, and to rest in that. James chapter 4, you know what I mean? Your life's a vapor. You don't know what will happen tomorrow. Just say, if the Lord wills, we'll do this or do that. Jesus, take no thought for tomorrow. You know what I mean? Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. Lord's Prayer, give us this day our daily bread. Exodus, the manna, just enough for today. All of these like form a composite sketch of a spirituality in Jesus and in the kingdom, where we make plans, but we detach from those plans at an emotional level from the outcomes of those plans. And so like our elders are having to do this ridiculous exercise where we're scenario planning for like 10 different possible scenarios. Here's what happens if we can't meet for 6 months, a year, 2 years. Here's what happens if we can meet in groups of this size. Here's what happens if we have to do house churches. Here's what happens if we can't do, you know, and it's an exercise in comedy, you know, and we have to just like write up the plan so that we're responsive, not reactive, but then we just have to set it down or close the file, have a good chuckle, and go make a cup of tea. You know, like we're totally out of our control. We have no control over a global disease and the economy and the government. We have no control. I can tweet about it in a desperate attempt to, but that's just a bad way of dealing with it. It doesn't do anything. So all that to say, you know, in my view of spiritual formation, I think that control is the crux issue for 90% of people. And I think that a grasping for control is incompatible with the three theological virtues of faith, hope, and love. And we could go through each one and talk about how control is incompatible with all three. I read a fascinating study recently that said the average Western person has 15% of the control over their life that they think they do, which is, I think, why there's so much anxiety and aggression and fear and despair and hurry and busyness and so little faith, hope, and love. And so this could be the great defining moment for our generation of learning to live with holy uncertainty, which the mystics long said is why God takes people through the dark night of the soul, through periods where they don't experience the felt presence of God. They said it was compassion, not cruelty. It was to rob you of your disillusion, your illusion of control, and let you realize that God's in control of your relationship with him, not you. God's in control of your spiritual formation. This is not a self-help project with Jesus on your side to like you are there to take up your cross, to yield, to surrender, to die to self, to let go and let God, as the Alcoholics Anonymous say, you know, to release that illusion of control in a deep trust and confidence of God, and let him enter that space as you enter into the Trinitarian life of the community of God, you know? So I think this is the defining moment for our generation. And, you know, there's been all sorts of studies done on the generation before you that was in London during World War II, and on how many came out shattered, but many came out actually as deeply happy and relaxed people. And Gen Z, which has known more security and safety than any other generation in Western history, is the most anxious generation on record. And so there's something about that uncertainty that people who grow up in war in Syria right now, or people who grow up in poverty or on the margins of society, or people that experience abuse or leukemia at a young age, they at least have the invitation to uncertainty and to make peace with that. And many of them can't do it, but many of them develop this extraordinary capacity to live with great joy and ease of spirit in the uncertainty of life. And this is the great invitation for our generation, you know? So that's a long way of saying, I have no idea what will happen to the church. I'm not really answering your question. I don't know. I think I could see a world where we're all back together by January and kind of, you know, or March, or I could see this having really long-term effects. It won't hurt the Church of Jesus. The Church of Jesus has filled stadiums, you know, of millions of people literally outdoors, and has gathered in groups of 2 or 3 where Jesus is. You know, it's taken 1,000 different iterations. Now, that's not to speak lightly of what will the effect be on a St. Aldate's or a Bridgetown church. I care, you know what I mean? It's not just for me like, well, if our church doesn't make it, bummer, but the church will go on. I care about our community, and I just don't know. You know, we're 2 months in. I think our church is stronger and more unified than it's ever been. But what if it turns into a year? I don't, nobody knows. Anybody who claims they know, I think they're talking out of their mouth. You know, I think the most honest answer is we don't know. There's some educated conjecture that we should listen to and think about, but we just don't know what will happen.
Well, that sounded so wise. I can't wait to listen to that again and go over it a few times. But that sounded to me releasing and refreshing. Thank you. John Mark, we've only got time for one more quick question.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you, why do you love Jesus?
Oh. To whom shall we go? You alone have the words of eternal life. That's what Peter said when he loved Jesus, but was really confused and struggled to follow him and had questions. And I so often come back to that. You know, I think I love Jesus, not to sound trite, but because he has loved me, in the language of John. Like, when I am in prayer, I feel and sense an overwhelming love come through Jesus, and from the Trinity itself, just that self-giving, generative, creative, overflowing love of the Spirit. And I mean, how do you not love that? And words of life, our secular world literally has no meaning other than you make of it. And that doesn't make the way of Jesus or the gospel true just because we want it to be true, but I think it does make the most sense of the human condition of anything. And man, when I think about the secular world, I this despair down that road, and any meaning you have for life is a made up one. And you're an animal, time and chance on your side, so just survive and get some pleasure along the way, and be a nice person. I just, man, that's not words of life for me. But there's a Trinitarian community at the center of all reality that created the universe out of self-giving love and beauty and joy and peace, and has come to us in Jesus to bring us back into that deep ordered principle at the center of all reality. And whatever happens, COVID-19 or the church closes or thrives, we will one day live in our body and our soul and our city and our world with the Trinitarian community as it was always meant to be. We have that hope no matter what. Yeah, it doesn't.
Beautiful.
That's it.
Beautiful.
That's it. Maybe that's not true. I really think it is. But man, it is there. I would rather be wrong and live into that vision of human flourishing than be right and live into the secular one. And I don't think the secular one is right. But you have to follow somebody. That's my great, it's a myth. Individualism is a myth. We all are disciples of somebody. And I don't know of anybody more compelling than Jesus.
Thank you. Well, John Mark, all I can say is that you help us love Jesus more. Present him to us in such a beautiful way, and you give us tools to help us follow him, and we're really grateful. And I'm so grateful for you joining us and giving us your time. I know you're busy. You got interviews all day. Thanks so much for hanging out with us here at St.
It's an honor. It's an honor. And thanks for maybe working a little late so you can get me on West Coast time.
Yeah. Bless you. Thank you.